What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and a lot of people want to see it to believe it when it comes to fantasy football, but this is a great way to miss out on league winners and breakouts. When we look at the top 12 running backs in points per game last year, 7 of them did so for the first time. You're not going to win your leagues by buying last year's production. You're going to win your leagues by finding the 7 running backs this year that finish in the top 12 for the first time, right? Finding this year's Kyren Williams, Raheem Mostert, Travis Etienne, Jahmyr Gibbs. And that's what we're here today to do. We're going to talk through 7 running backs you need to draft before they break out this season. As always, if you enjoy, we put a lot of research into these videos, so make sure you leave a like, subscribe. Let's go. So the idea behind this video is drafting running backs who haven't finished in the top 12 in points per game before, but have the chance to do so this year. And the first player we're going to talk about is not a crazy breakout candidate. Okay, we're going to get deeper as we go, but Bijan Robinson technically did not finish as a top 12 running back in points per game last year. He was the RB17. So technically it would be a breakout if he got there this year, but I actually wanted to talk about Bijan because there's still a lot of people that have a sour taste in their mouth over what happened last year. A lot of comments like this, and I don't even really want to put this guy on blast. He said some of the worst advice I've ever seen. I get that all the time. All right, whatever. Bijan is going to have a lot of carries taken away from him from Algier. Could be a 60-40 split, and Algier also catches the ball too, so it's not like Bijan is getting exclusive work, and his coach even said Algier will have a major role, which is true. And there's a lot of hesitancy towards Bijan, right? We can see here, this is his sleeper rank to the left of me. 6th overall. I would take him as high as 5th, 4th, 3rd, especially in RB hungry leagues as a smash pick in the first round. But there is some, I don't know, again, there's some hesitancy there when it comes to Bijan, and it really stems around this quote from Zach Robinson. Certainly, Tyler going to have a big role, and certainly at certain points of the season, a lot of certains here, we're going to be leaning on him. Quote from Zach Robinson, Twitter account, Coach Speak Index, and it's just, this is a new hire. First-time offensive coordinator. He's not going to say, Tyler Algier is going to just run back and forth getting water for Bijan Robinson. No, he's going to pump up his guy. So I'm not taking that too much to heart. And then when we look at projections here and we actually break down what a backfield looks like in the modern NFL, right, where there's no longer 25-plus touch bell cow running backs, these are Mike Clay projections. He does the projections over at ESPN. In my eyes, he has the best free projections out there. He goes through everything in terms of coach tendencies, scoring, Vegas, offensive line. He goes down all the way from the ground up with these projections. And here, I just want to outline how Bijan Robinson is his RB3 in PPR points for his projections. And even with that, Tyler Algier has 143 rush attempts, 5 rushing touchdowns, 28 catches, and 1 receiving touchdown. So that's over 150 touches and over 6 touchdowns in just a 14-game pace. He only does 14 games with the running backs because they miss time, but you can see here it outlines, even with Tyler Algier having a sizable role, Bijan Robinson still gets home as a top 3 running back in fantasy. And the reason for that is a couple of them. First, he's going to catch passes. Last year, he had over 80 targets. This year, he's going to flirt with 80-plus receptions, which is huge in these PPR leagues. And then 2, this offense is just going to be much better due to Zach Robinson at offense coordinator. This is a guy coming from the Rams, the McVay scheme, who we've seen have Todd Gurley, Kyren Williams, not even just that, just good offenses in general. And now you go from Desmond Ridder to Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix. And just to show how bad this offense truly was, I really like this tweet from Josh Norris here. The state of the Falcons offense last season. Deontay Foreman had 6 carries inside of the 5-yard line. Algier had 4. Bijan had 2. Deontay Foreman had as many carries as they did inside of the 5. So first, offense was brutal. If your top 2 running backs have just 6 carries inside of the 5, your offense sucked. And that's really what the case was last year, where they were the 7th worst offense in scoring last year. This year now, they are projected by Vegas to have the 13th most points scored in the NFL. So the offense will be better. And now you don't have Arthur Smith making weird decisions like giving Algier 4 inside the 5 carries to 2 for Bijan. So we are going to get efficiency. We're going to get pass catching. And even with Tyler Algier having a role, it's not a zero-sum game. These backfields are going to be split pretty much across the board, and that's going to be fine for Bijan because he's going to get there with efficiency. He's going to get there with a better offense. He's going to get there with catching. And this is a year 2 running back. The best of Bijan is still yet to come. Shout out to Ryan Heath in his age Curves and Cliffs article that he posts every year, we can see here running backs take a huge step forward in year 2. He said key takeaway here, just in terms of baseline career averages, generally speaking, running backs take a big step forward from year 1 to year 2, with peak production maintained from years 2 to 6. So you can see the best is yet to come for Bijan. To just look at what he did in his rookie year with Arthur Smith on a bad offense and say, okay, that guy doesn't have it, is crazy. He is the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley, super special talent. And in the right scheme this year, with a Rams tree coordinator, Bijan could absolutely crush. You could talk me into as high as 101 for Bijan if you truly wanted to this season. And I think anywhere inside of the top 5, he is a smash pick to finish as a top 12 running back. And if not, top 3, top 12 is really what I mean. So next up, we're going to go a little bit deeper. Still not super deep, but we have Isiah Pacheco here. He's going at the 304 over on Sleeper. We're just going to use Sleeper's default rankings for now. I think that's a decent gauge of what your home league might look like. He's going as the RB12 off the board. I will say with Pacheco, I'm not drafting a whole lot of him because I can't get there in the second round for ESPN and Yahoo leagues. I would much rather have Kyren Williams or Devon Achane, but on Sleeper, if he gets back to me in the third round, that's a smash pick. Anywhere in the third round, I'm completely fine with Pacheco. He was the RB14 in points per game last year, so it's not going to take a lot for him to get into the top 12 running backs, but I like his odds, and he already showed down the stretch what that might look like. This is a really good tweet from Ryan Heath here. Pacheco without Jerick McKinnon last year, 14.9% target share, which is really good. He has receiving upside, and then 22.1 points per game. That's what we're looking for. He said after the bye, Pacheco's red zone attempt share grew from 56.8% to 80.4%. Only Kyren Williams averaged more fantasy points per game in the red zone than Pacheco from weeks 10 to 18. And if this offense hums and Xavier Worthy is as good as advertised and Rashee Rice is out there and Kelsey, and this is going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL, right now they are projected for the 3rd most points by Vegas. Pacheco's going to be ramming a lot of those in on the goal line, and they didn't bring anybody else in this backfield, right? They didn't bring in a Samaje Perine or anything. It is just simply behind him Deneric Prince, it is CEH, it is Carson Steele's getting some buzz, but these are all fringe names. Pacheco will be the one, and then Jacob Gibbs outlines here. We already saw this in 4 playoff games. He had a 74% snap rate, 57% route participation, 20 rushes per game, 48% red zone opportunity rate, up from 38% in the regular season. So we already saw games without Jerick McKinnon, games in the playoffs. Isiah Pacheco had a role that would have very easily finished not only as a top 12 running back last year, but flirt with top 5 production. And this is somebody where Chiefs running backs used to be first-round picks in fantasy football, right? Kareem Hunt. Remember, Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a rookie. Before that, of course, you had like LaShawn McCoy with the Eagles, Brian Westbrook. It is a long list of guys, and Pacheco is just the next one for Andy Reid. Now, our third running back here, this is where we get into our true breakout candidate types, and we have James Cook. He's going at the 406, right in the middle of the 4th round on Sleeper as the RB14. And despite what people think about this Bills offense without Stephon Diggs, and people are people are like not big on the Bills offense this year, like Josh Allen in general, because they think, okay, no Stephon Diggs, they might not score as much, and it's like, Stephon Diggs is a good player, but Josh Allen is the straw that turns the drink, or stirs the drink. You guys know I do suck with those sayings, but highest projected scoring teams. When I will say, I do get this question a ton where it's like, Ron, where are you pulling these Vegas projections from? It's from this Connor Allen thread. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. He has a lot of really good info on there, and he went through back in June, look through all of the lines of like, okay, the Chiefs are -7 versus the Ravens in week 1 and so on and so forth, and found totals and spreads. And he pretty much extrapolated that out to what does Vegas think each of these offenses is going to score. And the Bills have the 5th highest projected point total. So they're going to score a lot of points, and they don't have a lot of receiver help, right? Curtis Samuel now has turf toe. You have Keon Coleman, a rookie who I like, but he's not going to score 15 touchdowns. You have Kincaid, who's a great pick, but a lot of these touchdowns are going to come from the run game, especially with new offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey, who took over, or not Ken Dorsey, Joe Brady, who took over last year for Ken Dorsey. And you can see here, Ken Dorsey had a 50% red zone pass rate. If we go down to Joe Brady, this is really good info from Jacob Gibbs here. Joe Brady had a 39% red zone pass rate with 42 rushing touchdowns and 36 passing touchdowns with his 1 season with the Panthers and then 7 games with the Bills last year. So this is somebody that even goes toe-to-toe with a guy like Jim Harbaugh back when he was with the Niners in terms of red zone rushing percentage. This is somebody that when he gets inside the red zone wants to run the ball. So if we have an environment that's going to score the 5th most touchdowns in the league, and we have a coach that wants to run the ball in close on the goal line, there's going to be a lot of rushing touchdowns to go around for the Bills. Now, I will say this is why I'm very high on Josh Allen this year. I think that Josh Allen's going to score a lot of rushing touchdowns. I think Ray Davis is a great flyer at the back end of drafts. But if James Cook can even get like half of the goal line looks, we're talking about somebody that can crush his ADP and finish in the top 12 very, very easily. This is from Dwayne McFarland over on Fantasy Life. He charted the Week 2 preseason games, and James Cook played 88% of the snaps. He handled 100% of the rush attempts during his 4 drives with the starting offensive line. He also posted an 82% route participation, which is really crazy. Like anything above 60% is really good. Last week, the 30-year back handled 100% of the work before exiting with Josh Allen. We never want to overreact to small preseason samples, but there is a chance he bests the 49% rush share and 48% route participation rate in my projections by a decent margin. So this is somebody that's on the field in all phases, running routes, doing his thing. I will say, he's sub 200 pounds. So the goal line role is 100% a huge question mark. And that's kind of the give and take with James Cook right now, is if he gets the goal line role, he's way mispriced. If he doesn't, then we're probably drafting him at about, his median to ceiling projections. But I would even say he's not somebody that I'm expecting to score 15 rushing touchdowns. But if he can just get in the mix for like 6 to 10 and kind of be what Jahmyr Gibbs was last year, where he's not this like battering ram, but he's somebody that can be out there and mix in, I think he's at least going to get that opportunity. And if he gets stuffed, they'll take that away from him. But if he can just mix in for like 5 to 10 touchdowns, his receiving upside is already so good that I don't really think that the touchdowns are a make or break for him. But they are the skeleton key to that crazy big ceiling. And just to go a little bit further with his usage last year, we already kind of saw what it looked like when he didn't score touchdowns. Last year, he was on pace for 7 receiving touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, so 9 total touchdowns. And here, once Joe Brady took over after I believe it was in week 11, it was after they lost to the Broncos, he takes over and gives James Cook 16.7 points per game, a pace of 63 targets, a pace of like 1,700 yards from scrimmage. And I still think that 63 target total is still very low for what he could get to. I really do think that he can get to like 80 catches. This is somebody who's not just a check down guy. He, over the last 2 years, has been a top 5 running back in average depth of target. He's running routes downfield. He's not just a like swing pass type of merchant. Like, he is somebody that's actually a receiving weapon. And in an offense right now, we just talked about with Curtis Samuel hurt, we could very much see a lot of receiving game work for him. And then if he gets the touchdowns as well, it's over. Like, we're talking top 5 running back upside. This is somebody who is actually really good, where he has the best rushing yards over expected per attempt over the last 2 years. He has the second most rush attempts of over 10 yards last year, and he was top 10 in yards per carry and yards per catch. It's an efficiency monster across the board. He's super explosive, and in this role, he could really thrive. Now, our 4th breakout running back here that I think can finish in the top 12 for the first time this year, Kenneth Walker. We just drafted him last night on stream. I'm really trying to go, because early in the offseason, I wasn't all that into Kenneth Walker, just the Seahawks offense in general, but I'm really coming around on him. I'm trying to make up for lost time here with Kenneth Walker. He's going to 501 as the RB16. If he is on the board at any point in time when I'm on the clock in the 5th round, he is a smash. Last year wasn't pretty, but I'm kind of tempted to throw it out. Bruised shoulder, strained oblique, chest soreness, calf soreness. He was banged up all over the place. You also had a coach who was on his way out in Pete Carroll. You also had banged up Geno Smith. You had Drew Lock come in for a game or two. The offense just didn't look right. And now we get Ryan Grubb coming from the Washington Huskies offensive scheme. He's now the play caller OC for the Seahawks. And these were, in the last 2 years, what his offenses looked like at Washington. Pretty crazy. EPA per play is just efficiency. So total EPA, like total offensive efficiency, amazing. You can see the first year he had 74 plays per game, so he actually pushed the tempo. Second year didn't do it as much, but I think that might have just been because Washington was so dominant. But this is a really, really good offense. They're going to throw the ball downfield and throw the ball a ton, which you might be like, well, how is that good for Walker? Well, it's going to give him a lot of light boxes. You now have to account for DK Metcalf downfield, JSN vertical down the seam. It can really open things up for Kenneth Walker. And this is a new coaching staff, which gives him an upside to like an all-purpose role. And we've already seen Ryan Grubb just absolutely gush over him. He said, I think he gets better every single day. I think the sky's the limit for him. I think he's really, really talented, powerful back that's a true 3-tool guy. He's electric out of the backfield as a pass catcher. Then he said Ken Walker receiving efficiency in 2023 among 150 routes from fantasy point data. 8th best in yards per out run, 2nd best in missed tackles forced per reception, 2nd best in yards at the contact, or is that yards at the catch per reception? It's one of the two, but he was really, really good just in terms of efficiency, per route. Just in terms of the pass catcher, he's efficient. He wasn't known as a pass catcher in college, but I'm open to the idea that a coach might want to expand his role just because of how explosive he's been during his career. When we look at just since he entered the league from Ryan Heath, he leads all running backs over the last 2 years in missed tackles forced with 145, which is pretty bonkers. I could see him being an all-purpose guy who just gets all 3 down work. This offense progresses a little bit, the offensive line gets a little bit better, or he could kind of have like a early career like Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor type of year. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but some people do believe that he is that talented as a rusher, and if he is, that could be his path to getting there if the receiving upside isn't all there. Now, this is where we get into our long shots, right? These are now our like plus 1,000 tickets to finish inside of the top 12 in points per game. But this one's a little bit of a cheat code. We're going to say John Brooks because I think that he can get there on a points per game basis. He's going in the 805 as the RB27, and he's coming off of a torn ACL. He tore his ACL in November, which isn't great, but I think this is a pretty good comparison from Dave Kluge here. It says Todd Gurley tore his ACL on November 15th in 2014 at 20 years old. Here's how many touches he had as a rookie in 2015. He was inactive the first 2 weeks, then 7, then 21, then 30. Jonathon Brooks tore his ACL on November 11th, 2023 at 20 years old. Then we have Edwin Porras here, who is a injury analyst in the fantasy space. He also said a similar thing. In 2015, Todd Gurley had ACL surgery around the same time in season as Jonathon Brooks. The following year, he finishes the RB8. So we could see a world where Jonathon Brooks is going to start slow. And I think that's the biggest disclaimer for Jonathon Brooks is do not draft him in a team where he would have to start early in the season. He is a guy that you draft if you already have 2 running backs, or maybe you have a guy like Jerome Ford who can score early for you. And I don't even think that it's that crazy. I know that I'm usually against drafting a handcuff of your same player, but you could also just draft Chuba Hubbard and kind of play it that way if you'd like to as well. But this is somebody that has a lot of upside here. I know Todd Gurley finished RB5 in points per game as a rookie. I think that John Brooks is not nearly the same talent as that, right? Todd Gurley was a first-round pick. Brooks was a second-round pick. But we did also see a lot of guys that weren't in the same tier of prospect as Todd Gurley become really good, right? Like Breece Hall, Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, all as rookies. And I'm not saying that Jonathon Brooks is for sure in the same talent bucket as those guys. I'm just saying when we draft a rookie, he is a mystery box, right? We don't know what that guy is going to look like in the NFL, and those are his ceiling outcomes, is being a guy that, oh man, maybe this guy should have gone in the first round. And there are reports out there that you can look back at what Schefter said during the draft. He would have maybe been a first-round pick had he not tore his ACL. So I kind of do like the idea of drafting Jonathon Brooks. You hold him early. He's probably going to miss the first 2 to 3 games. He'll ramp up, and then by week 6, 7, 8, he'll be startable, and he's going to be in a Dave Canales offense that we want pieces of. This is a good tweet from Ryan Heath here, where Dave Canales goes to the Seahawks. Geno Smith's per attempt pass efficiency, that's just what adjusted net yards per attempt is, goes up. Same thing for Baker. And now this year, that could be Bryce Young. So we can see this Panthers offense really take a step forward, and I was going to say but not but just go from like bottom 5 dumpster fire to league average, which would be huge. And then we've also seen Dave Canales give a ton of work to a guy like Rachaad White, and that could be a similar role that we could see for Jonathon Brooks. Rachaad White had over 300 touches last year, so he is going to rely on a workhorse, and that could be Jonathon Brooks down the stretch. And I do just want to point out, in terms of just like prospecting, when we look at missed tackles forced per touch and receiving fantasy points per snap over a collegiate player's entire career, Jonathon Brooks is in a rare category where he's 216 pounds. He is between Javonte Williams, Kenneth Walker, and Breece Hall in missed tackles forced per touch, and he has a higher receiving fantasy points per snap than Breece Hall, than Dalvin Cook, then of course, I mean, Jonathan Taylor wasn't that great, but he can catch passes, he can make people miss, and he has size. He has everything that you're looking for a running back to break out. It just comes down to the ACL tear and what he looks like after that. Now, the next guy we're going to talk about is Javonte Williams. And I know that I'm going to get some comments here of like, well, isn't this hypocritical? You just said draft Jonathon Brooks, and now you're going to say to draft Javonte Williams and blame last year's bad year on an ACL tear. Well, here is what I would say. Jonathon Brooks is just 20 years old, and it was a clean ACL tear. The difference is that Javonte Williams wasn't that young, and then he also had multi-ligament damage, where he had an ACL tear, PCL, MCL, complete reconstruction, which is a much tougher injury to work back from. It's not as clean, right? And that's what we saw last year play out. Breece Hall had a clean ACL tear. He was good to go. Javonte had multi-ligaments. He was not. Similar ACL tear to what we saw from J.K. Dobbins. But I do think that this year, a year removed from that, he can bounce back, because last year he really took a hit in terms of efficiency. His yards per carry was down, rushing yards over expected per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, explosive rush percentage. Literally everything you look at, he was much worse in. But we do know that running backs bounce back from these injuries and they become more efficient in year like N+1 or N+2, whatever it would be, from these ACL tears. And if he can go back to his efficiency from that first 1 to 2 year stretch, then we're really cooking here in this Sean Payton offense, because Sean Payton uses his running backs a ton. Last year, in terms of running back usage, they were 6th among all backfield, just in terms of usage. So that's red zone attempts, carries, targets, all of that. How much fantasy points were expected to go to the running back position. This is a chart from Hayden Winks. And then this is also a good stat from Sean Siegel over at RotoViz. And he said in 17 years, Payton has never had an offense finish outside the top 5 in receiving expected points to the running backs. By contrast, Russell Wilson had never had a season inside the top 20 until the previous year in Denver. And what this illustrates is that every season, Sean Payton gives so much targets to his running backs that they are top 5 in receiving expected points every single year that he's coached. And it's even quarterback proof, where a guy like Russell Wilson, who has historically never targeted the running back, did so in Denver with Sean Payton. So there's going to be a lot of targets, there's going to be a lot of usage. And if this offense can take any kind of step forward with Bo Nix, we could see a really big year for Javonte. Now, even if this offense doesn't take a step forward, we're going to have the usage. We're going to have a year 2 back from ACL efficiency bump. And then we're also going to have Javonte as the clear workhorse back with Samaje Perine likely cut. Samaje Perine was out there playing after all the starters were done this past week. And a lot of the beat reporters seem to think that he will be cut from the team, which leaves him to be working with Audric Estime, who is a day 3 between the tackles grinder, who's going to be fine, but he'll just take like a couple touches here and there. And you have Jaleel McLaughlin, who I like, but he is 187 pounds. He's not going to be reliable in pass protection. So now you have Javonte Williams, who Benjamin Albright here, he is one of the more plugged-in guys with the Denver Broncos, and he believes it'll be a 1-2-3 punch. He obviously doesn't list Samaje Perine. He has Javonte Williams as the RB1. And somebody asked, are any of them worth rostering for fantasy purposes? He said Javonte Williams. So it's all setting up for a big year for Javonte. I think he could be out there in passing scenarios. He could be out there as the main back. He could be out there on the goal line. And if he can take up a lot of, that big usage share we see Sean Payton give to the running backs, and we're talking about a guy that can definitely finish inside of the top 12. And then our last running back candidate here, this one's a flyer, because I don't know if the offense will be good enough, and I don't know if he'll get enough volume. But I do really like Tyjae Spears. He's going the 10-01 as the RB37. And I will say, too, with Javonte, I didn't mention it, but he's going in the 8th round as the RB30. Anytime that Javonte, like similar to Kenneth Walker, anytime that Kenneth Walker, I look up and he's in the 5th round, I'm taking him. Anytime I look up and Javonte Williams is there in the 8th round, I'm taking him. Now, Tyjae Spears, he's going at the 10-01 on Sleeper as the RB37. And he is a year 2 running back. So that stuff that we talked about with Bijan still applies. We want to be targeting year 2 breakouts with these running backs. What we saw last year with Breece Hall. We saw last year, I would kind of consider it ETN, right, where he had like a redshirt year and then like a pseudo, like almost like Ben Simmons rookie year and then truly broke out last year. I think we could see that with Tyjae Spears this year, where he has a real year 2 bump here. And this is somebody who last year could have just been the pure handcuff in a backfield next to Derrick Henry, but instead he forced himself to a 52% snap share, again, in a backfield with Derrick Henry, who is beloved by the Titans and really good in his own right. Tyjae Spears was good enough to get on the field 52% of the time and then also finish inside of the top 10 in running backs with 70 targets. So we have upside in terms of target upside. We have upside in him as a talent, where we look at Dynasty Zoltan's tweet here, him versus Tony Pollard, who they just signed, just in terms of efficiency on yards per attempt, yards per touch, yards created per touch, yards at the contact, missed tackles forced, all of that. He smokes him in. Yards per route run, smokes him in. So he's more efficient between the tackles. He is a better receiving back. He has continuity with the team already. And we could very much see this be like a 1A, 1B that he could just run away with by the end of the year. And I think this is a team that's not going to be all that great. So there could be a lot of targets to go around. And with like DeAndre Hopkins banged up, Tyjae Spears could rack up a lot of targets in this offense if he gets that 3rd down and 2-minute drill role. And then he also fits in really well in this offense, where you have Brian Callahan coming over from the Bengals. He's going to run up-tempo and pass the ball a ton. And what that means as well is that he brought his dad, who's an offensive line coach. I believe that's Bill Callahan. He's one of the best in the league. He drafts J.C. Latham top 10. The offensive line should be improved on the Tennessee Titans. And then this is a really good nugget from Scott Barrett over at Fantasy Points. And he said, Spears might be the perfect running back for a Brian Callahan rushing scheme. The following is from Jacob Gibbs. The Bengals ran out of shotgun 73% of the time in 2023, third most, well above Tennessee's 40%. Spears averaged 7 yards per carry from shotgun in college versus just 4.3 yards per carry the rest of the time. Spears also averaged 6.1 yards per carry on zone attempts and 8.4 on man gap concept runs at Tulane. By EPA per run, Spears is actually the most effective man gap rusher to enter the NFL draft over the past 8 draft classes. Cincinnati ranked 6th in man gap run rate last year. So we're going to see a lot of rushes out of shotgun, a lot of man gap scheme, and that is Tyjae Spears' specialty. So if Tony Pollard comes out here and his efficiency doesn't bounce back at all from last year, Spears could be the main back. He could catch a ton of passes. Now, he's not going to ever be a 20-plus touch back, but he is very much in that same category of Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, of guys who don't need those touches but can get there on efficiency and explosive plays and PPR target upside. So Tyjae Spears, to me, is really, really interesting anywhere like the 9th or 10th round. Now, that is going to do it for us today. That is 7 running backs to draft before they break out and before they hit a top 12 point per game finish for the first time in their career. As always, we have them all highlighted, targeted in the ranks over on patreon.com. I have my top 200. It's tiered. It has my target rounds for each and every single player, my targets, my avoids. It is the one cheat sheet that if I could only bring one thing into my home league draft, a high stakes draft, it would be this cheat sheet. You can find it over on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. But if you can't support there, just leave a like, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh, oh.